Park Lane, December 2nd, 1790. To James Boswell, Esquire. Sir, I have been fortunately spared the troublesome suspense of a long search to which, in performance of my promise, I had devoted this morning, by lighting upon the objects of it among the first papers that I laid my hands on, my veneration for your great and good friend Dr. Johnson, and the pride, or I hope something of a better sentiment, which I indulge in bestowing such memorials of his good will towards me, having induced me to bind them in a parcel containing other select papers, and labeled with the titles appertaining to them. It was a very long sentence. They consist but of 3 letters, which I believe were all that I ever received from Dr. Johnson. Of these, one, which was written in quadruplicate, under the different dates of its respective dispatches, has already been made public, but not from any communication of mine. This, however, I have joined to the rest, and have now the pleasure of sending them to you for the use to which you inform me it was your desire to destine them. My promise was pledged with the condition that if the letters were found to contain anything which should render them improper for the public eye, you would dispense with the performance of it. You will have the goodness, I am sure, to pardon my recalling this stipulation to your recollection, as I should be loath to appear negligent of that obligation which is always implied in an epistolary confidence. In the reservation of that right, I have read them over with the most scrupulous intention, but have not seen in them the slightest cause on the ground to withhold them from you. But though not at that, yet on another ground I own I feel a little, but a little, reluctance to part with them. I mean on that of my own credit, which I fear will suffer by the information conveyed by them, that I was early in the possession of such valuable instructions for the beneficial employment of the influence of my late station, and, as it may seem, have so little availed myself of them. Whether I could, if it were necessary, defend myself against such an imputation, it little concerns the world to know. I look only to the effect which these relics may produce, considered as evidence of the virtues of their author, and believing that they will be found to display an uncommon warmth of private friendship, in a mind ever attentive to the improvement and extension of useful knowledge, and solicitous for the interest of mankind. I can truthfully submit to the little sacrifice of my own fame to contribute to the illustration of so great and venerable a character. They cannot be better applied for that end than by being entrusted to your hands. Allow me, with this offering, to infer from it a proof of the very great esteem with which I have the honor to profess myself. Sir, your most obedient and most humble servant, Warren Hastings. P.S. At some future time, and when you have no further occasion for these papers, I shall be obliged to you if you would return them. Well, that was very wordy. Jeez, but I guess, when you're sending letters back then, you really wanted to get your money's worth, so why not write a lot, right? Go into all that hassle. So this is Boswell now. The last of the 3 letters thus graciously put into my hands, and which has always appeared in public, already appeared in public, belongs to this year. But I shall previously insert the first 2 in the order of their dates. They altogether form a great group in my biographical picture. A grand group, even. It's weird that I read grand and I misread grand as great. What does that say about me? Okay, here's the first letter. To the Honorable Warren Hastings, Esquire. Sir, though I have had but little personal knowledge of you, I have had enough to make me wish for more. And though it be now a long time since I was honored by your visit, I had too much pleasure from it to forget it. But those whom we delight to remember, we are unwilling to be forgotten. But those whom we delight to remember, we are unwilling to be forgotten. And therefore I cannot omit this opportunity of reviving myself in your memory by a letter which you will receive from the hands of my friend Mr. Chambers, afterwards Sir Robert Chambers, one of His Majesty's judges in India. A man whose purity of manners and vigor of mind are sufficient to make everything welcome that he brings. That this is my only reason for writing will be too apparent by the uselessness of my letter to any other purposes. I have no questions to ask. Not that I want curiosity after either the ancient or present state of regions in which have been seen all the power and splendor of wide extended empire, in which, as by some grant of natural superiority, supply the rest of the world with almost all that pride desires and luxury enjoys. But my knowledge of them is too scanty to furnish me with proper topics of inquiry. I can only wish for information and hope that a mind comprehensive like yours will find leisure, amidst the cares of your important station, to inquire into many subjects of which the European world either thinks not at all or thinks with deficient intelligence and uncertain conjecture. I shall hope that he who once intended to increase the learning of his country by the introduction of the Persian language will examine nicely the traditions of the histories of the East, that he will survey the wonders or remains of its ancient edifices, and trace the vestiges of its ruined cities, and that, at his return, we shall know the arts and opinions of a race of men from whom very little has been hitherto derived. You, sir, have no need to being told by me how much may be added to by your attention and patronage to experimental knowledge in natural history. There are arts of manufacture practiced in the countries in which you preside, which are yet very imperfectly known here, either to artificers or philosophers. Of the natural productions, animate and inanimate, we yet have so little intelligence that our books are filled, I fear, with conjectures about things which an Indian peasant knows by his senses. Many of those things by my first wish is to see, my second to know by such accounts as a man like you will be able to give. As I have not skill to ask proper questions, I have likewise no such access to great men as can enable me to send you any political information. Of the agitations of an unsettled government and the struggles of a feeble ministry, care is doubtless taken to give you more exact accounts than I can obtain. If you are inclined to interest yourself much in public transactions, it is no misfortune to you to be so distant from them. That literature is not totally forsaking us, and that your favorite language is not neglected, will appear from the book, Jones's Persian Grammar, which I should have pleased myself more with sending if I could have presented or procured it bound, but time was wanting. I beg, however, sir, that you will accept it from a man very desirous of your regard, and if you think me able to gratify you by anything more important, you will employ me. I am now going to take leave, perhaps a very long leave, of my dear Mr. Chambers. That he is going to live where you govern may justly alleviate the regret of parting, in the hope of seeing both them and you again, which I am not willing to mingle with doubt, much at present comfort, or present content as it can, sir. Your most humble servant, March 30th, 1774, Sam Johnson. So that was, that's from 1774. This one is also from 1774. I guess they're all maybe from 1774. Oh no, this one is from 1774, and the final one is from 1781. To the same, sir, being informed that by the departure of the ship, there is now an opportunity of writing to Bengal, I am unwilling to slip out of your memory by my own negligence, and therefore take the liberty of reminding you of my existence by sending you a book which is not yet made public. I have lately visited a region less remote and less illustrious than India, which afforded some occasions for speculation. That has occurred to me, I have put into the volume. What has occurred to me, I have put into the volume. This is Journey to the Western Islands of Scotland. which I beg your acceptance. Men in your station seldom have presence totally disinterested. My book is received. Let me now make my request. There is, sir, somewhere within your government, a young adventurer, one Chauncey Lawrence, whose father is one of my oldest friends. Be pleased to show the young man what countenance is fit, whether he wants to be restrained by your authority or encouraged by your favor. His father is now president of the College of Physicians, a man venerable for his knowledge and more venerable for his virtue. I wish you a prosperous government, a safe return, and a long enjoyment of plenty and tranquility. I am, sir, your most obedient and most humble servant, London, December 20th, 1774, Sam Johnson. And this final one is from January 9, although the holograph of the British Museum says it's dated January 29th, 1781. To the same, sir. Amidst the importance of multiplicity of affairs in which your great office engages you, I take the liberty of recalling your attention for a moment to literature, and will not prolong the interruption by an apology which your character makes needless. Mr. Hoole, a gentleman long known and long esteemed in the India House, after having translated Tasso, has undertaken Ariosto. How well he is qualified for his undertaking he has already shown. He is desirous, sir, of your favor in promoting his proposals, and flatters me by supposing that my testimony may advance his interest. It is a new thing for a clerk of the Indian House to translate poets. It is new for a governor of Bengal to patronize learning. That he may find his ingenuity rewarded, and that learning may flourish under your protection, is the wish of, sir, your most humble servant, Sam Johnson. Now we're back to Boswell. I wrote to him in February, that being Johnson, complaining of having been troubled by a recurrence of the perplexing question of liberty and necessity, capital L, capital N, and mentioning that I hoped soon to meet him again in London. His return letter to James Boswell, Esquire. Dear sir, I hoped you had got rid of all this hypocrisy of misery. What have you to do with liberty and necessity? Or what more than to hold your tongue about it? Do not doubt but I shall be most heartily glad to see you here again, for I love every part about you but your affectation of distress. I have at last finished my lives, and have laid up for you a load of copy, all out of order, so that it will amuse you a long time to set it right. Come to me, my dear Bozzy, and let us be as happy as we can. We will go again to the Mitre, and talk old times over. I am, dear sirs, yours affectionately, March 14, 1781, Sam Johnson. Oh, I'd love to go to the Mitre and talk things over with Bozzy and Sammy Johnson, whatever he calls himself. So it's from March 14, 1781. On Monday, March 19th, I arrived in London, and on Tuesday, the 20th, met him in Fleet Street, walking, or rather, indeed, moving along, for his peculiar march is thus described in a very just and picturesque manner in a short life of him, published very soon after his death. When he walked the streets, what with the constant roll of his head and the concomitant motion of his body, he appeared to make his way by that motion, independent of his feet. He kind of waddles around, I guess. That he was often much stared at while he advanced in his manner may easily be believed, but it was not safe to make sport of one so robust as he was. Mr. Langton saw him one day, in a fit of absence, by a sudden start, drive the load of a porter's back, and walk forward briskly, without being conscious of what he was doing. The porter was very angry, but stood still and eyed the huge figure with much earnestness, till he was satisfied that his wisest course was to be quiet and take up his burthen again. There's a footnote about this life, the short life, published by Kersey with this well-chosen motto: "From his cradle he was a scholar, and a ripe and good one, and to add greater honor to his age than man could give him, he died fearing heaven." From Shakespeare. Our accidental meeting in the street after a long separation was a pleasing surprise to us both. He stepped aside with me into Falcon Court and made kind inquiries about my family, and as we were in a hurry going different ways, I promised to call on him next day. He said he was engaged to go out in the morning. "Early, sir?" said I. Johnson said, "Why, sir, a London morning does not go with the sun." I waited on him next evening, and he gave me a great portion of his original manuscript of his Lives of the Poets, which he had preserved for me. I found on visiting his friend, Mr. Thrale, that he was now very ill, and had removed, I suppose by the solicitation of Mrs. Thrale, to a house in Grosvenor Square. I was sorry to see him sadly changed in his appearance. He told me I might now have the pleasure to see Dr. Johnson drink wine again, for he had lately returned to it. When I mentioned this to Johnson, he said, "I drink it now sometimes, but not socially." The first evening that I was with him at Thrale's, I observed he poured a quantity of it into a large glass and swallowed it greedily. Everything about his character and manners was forcible and violent. There never was any moderation. Many a day did he fast, many a year did he refrain from wine. But when he did eat, it was voraciously. When he did drink wine, it was copiously. He could practice abstinence, but not temperance. Mrs. Thrale and I had a dispute whether Shakespeare or Milton had drawn the most admirable picture of a man. I was for Shakespeare, Mrs. Thrale for Milton, and after a fair hearing, Johnson decided for my opinion. There's a footnote here about that. Shakespeare makes Hamlet thus describe his father from Act 3, Scene 4. "See what a grace was seated on this brow, Hyperion's curls, the front of Jove himself, an eye like Mars to threaten and command, a station like the herald Mercury, new lighted on a heaven-kissing hill, a combination in a form indeed, where every god did seem to set his seal, to give the world assurance of a man." Milton thus portrays our first parent, Adam, in Paradise Lost, volume 4, line 300. "His fair, large front and eye sublime declared, absolute rule, and hyacinthine locks, round from his parted forelock manly hung, clustering but not beneath his shoulders broad." I'm with Boswell and Johnson. I like the Hamlet more. I told him of one of Mr. Burke's playful sallies upon Dean Marley. Quote, "I don't like the deanery of Ferns. It sounds so like a barren title." "Dr. Heath should have it," said I. Johnson laughed, and condescending to trifle in the same mode of conceit, suggested Dr. Moss. That's over my head. Inside joke. Johnson said, "Mrs. Montague has dropped me. Now, sir, there are people whom one should like very well to drop, but would not wish to be dropped by. He certainly was vain of the society of ladies, and could make himself very agreeable to them when he chose it. Sir Joshua Reynolds agreed with me that he could. Mr. Gibbon, with his usual sneer, controverted it, perhaps in resentment of Johnson having talked with some disgust of his ugliness, which one would think a philosopher would not mind. Dean Marley wittily observed, 'A lady may be vain when she can turn a wolf dog into a lapdog.' The election for Ayrshire, my own county, was this spring tried upon a petition before the committee of the House of Commons. I was one of the counsel for the sitting member. and took the liberty of previously stating different points to Johnson, who never failed to see them clearly and to supply me with some good hints. He dictated to me the following note upon the registration of deeds. Oh, well, I guess I'll not rush into that yet. I'll do that tomorrow. Till next time, bye from Boswell.